Well, good evening. Welcome to our October 16th, 2025 council meeting. I'd like to acknowledge we're holding this on the traditional lands of the Kalama Nation. We will start with the adoption of the agenda.
So moved.
Any discussion on the agenda? All in favor? Passed unanimously. Public input period. Up to 3 members of the public have an opportunity to provide comment for a maximum of 2 minutes on items listed under legislative matters, committee recommendations, and new business. Please come forward, introduce yourself.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Catherine Yorlofson. I thought I had 3 minutes, but I'll talk fast. I would like to comment on item 9.1 under legislative matters, bylaw amendments to align SOCP with housing needs report. I do sincerely hope that my comments are not going to be point of order. I'm trying not to. Okay, but I wanted to make a couple of notes that are relevant to 9.1. Under Bill 44, Housing Statutes, any application for rezoning to a residential property in any BC municipality, if that application falls under existing SOCP, the municipality may not hold public meetings. If such an application does not fall under the municipality's SOCP, then public hearings and full community engagement to modify the SOCP is allowed and indeed advised. We currently have 2 applications that as of today will require changes to our SOCP in order to be approved. Each of these represents significantly larger development with greater density than Powell River has ever considered before. These are beach gardens and benchlands. My concern with bylaw amendments as proposed in 9.1 of today's agenda is that these proposed changes to the SOP through bylaw 2783,2025 will result in an SOCP where the applications for beach gardens and benchlands are now within the SOCP as they move forward. This would result in no public hearings being allowed for these 2 applications. I recognize that there will be public hearings for the overall changes to our SOCP as proposed in this bylaw. However, there will be many issues raised and discussed during these hearings, most especially for the, quote, 7 classes of housing need identified in the most recent HNR. I feel strongly that in this format, the issues specific to beach gardens and benchlands will be lost. If the changes proposed in bylaw 2783,2025 result in beach gardens and benchlands now falling under our SOCP, makes me feel that there's been a bit of an end run to approve the 2 largest developments with the greatest density that our city has ever seen. In reading through the documents attached to today's agenda item 9.1, it's safe to say that I have absolutely no idea if the proposed bylaw amendment 2783 will or will not result in an SOCP where beach gardens and benchlands no longer fall outside of the revised SOCP. I sincerely hope not, as on each development, each will result in significant density, changes to our community, and most especially significant changes in the immediate vicinity of each. As such, I feel they deserve full and transparent input from residents. In closing, I may not ask a question until the question period at the end of the meeting tonight, but I will have one. I hope that our Director of Planning Services, Jason Gao, will be available to answer it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Anybody online? Great. We'll move now to item 7, which is the consent agenda.
I move,
Isaacson,
move adoption of the consent agenda October 16th, 2025.
seconded by Councillor Southcott. Any discussion? All in favor? Passes unanimously. Now move to 7.1, adoption of the minutes of the regular council meeting held October 2nd, 2025. Oh, we just did the consent agenda. Thank you. Now move to, since there were no items removed, to the legislative matters. 9.1, bylaw amendment to align SOCP with housing needs report.
Good evening, Council. I do have a presentation, but you know what? The opportunity to address Ms. Orlifson's question, I think it would be great to just touch on that right now, and then we can get into it. But in fact, there is going to be no change to the way we process beach gardens or benchlands. These are just tweaks to the bylaw, the OCP, as it relates to Bill 44 to align our bylaw with housing needs report. There will still be a public hearing required for both benchlands and beach gardens. There will be a zoning, a public hearing related to the zoning bylaw as well for both of those projects, because they do not currently align with the OCP as proposed by the application. So just confirmation for Ms. Orlifson. I think she did mention she wasn't sure about whether or not there would be an impact. I can confirm what we're talking about tonight is not going to change the process related to those.
Thank you for that clarification.
Great. So the purpose of tonight's report is to present amendments to the City of Powell River Sustainable Official Community Plan Bylaw 2370-2014 in order to accommodate the city's 20-year housing need as required under Section 473 of the Local Government Act that requires the local government to align its official community plan with the findings from the most recent housing needs report. In 2023, the province introduced amendments to the Local Government Act through the passing of Bill 44. This resulted in changes to the timing and content requirements of housing needs reports. There is also a requirement that municipalities complete an interim housing needs report by January 1st, 2025, and Council received the city's interim housing needs report on December 2024. Local governments are also required to review and amend their official community plans and zoning bylaws to accommodate anticipated housing need as outlined in their housing needs report. And the mandated timeline to complete this task is December 31st, 2025. The scope of proposed updates will focus on amendments to align local housing supply and growth with the content requirements contained within Bill 44. Under the new legislation, local governments are required to include housing policies that address each of the 7 classes of housing need identified by the province and included in their most recent housing needs report. And on the screen, you can see the 7 classes of housing that were identified by the province. These are affordable housing, rental housing, special needs housing, seniors housing, family housing, shelters for individuals experiencing homelessness, and housing for individuals at risk of homelessness, and housing in close proximity to transportation infrastructure that supports walking, bicycling, public transit, and other alternative forms of transportation. Following the review of the Sustainable Official Community Plan, staff determined that the city's current housing policy framework addresses all categories except for one, and that is the Sustainable Official Community Plan does not reference shelters for individuals experiencing homelessness. To address this gap, staff are proposing that a new policy be included in the Official Community Plan, and I won't read it out, but you can see it on the screen there. In addition to updates to an official community plan, municipalities are also required to review their zoning bylaws to ensure that they are sufficiently zoned to accommodate at a minimum their 20-year identified housing need. In the housing needs report that Council received on December 5th of last year, a net need of 2,543 additional units of housing is needed from 2021 to 2041. Based on the guidance provided by the province, staff have determined that the city has a maximum potential zoned capacity within its restricted zones of almost 20,000 dwelling units. This represents the maximum number of dwelling units that all residential zones within Part 8 of the zoning bylaw and Comprehensive Development Zone 4, CD Zone 4, can accommodate. This figure is only a theoretical baseline as it does not consider site constraints such as the capacity of existing city infrastructure, market conditions, or site constraints that could affect the uptake. So on the screen, you can see table 1 from the report. And so if you take the theoretical baseline that I said was just a little under 20,000, so that's 19,977, and you subtract the total number of private dwellings in the city at the time of the last census, so that is 6,718, subtract the number of net new dwelling units approved by the city since 2021, which is 402, and you subtract the city's 20-year housing need based on the housing needs report, which is 2,543. You see that number down at the bottom that is 10,314. That's how many units we exceed our housing needs based on the way we approach dealing with Bill 44. And that's because through all of our restricted zones, we allowed up to 4 dwelling units. And so those restricted zones in our community take up a vast majority of the area. So based on this, no amendments to the zoning bylaw are required at this time. So for next steps, Section 475 of the Local Government Act requires that during the development or amendment of an OCP, a local government must provide one or more opportunities for consultations with persons, organizations, and authorities it considers will be affected. Please note that under consultation under this section, consultation under this section does not exclude a public hearing. It means that a public hearing is also required as part of this. Given the limited scope of the amendments proposed, staff recommend that meeting the minimum standard of community consultation required when an amendment to the OCP is proposed is an appropriate situation in this case. To be clear, current changes being proposed to the Sustainable Official Community Plan represent the most straightforward approach to achieving compliance with provincially mandated requirements. To meet the intent of 475, it is recommended that Council direct staff to issue notice of Council's intention to consider first and second reading of City of Powell River Sustainable Official Community Plan 2370, 2014, Amendment Bylaw 2783, 2025 at a future meeting of Council. Notice will be placed in the newspaper in accordance with applicable legislative requirements. And for Council to review a draft of the proposed amendment bylaws attached to this staff report. And that completes my presentation.
Questions? Do I see a hand? Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wondered if we could explain what is meant by a restricted zone, just for people who may not know what that is.
Absolutely. So a restricted zone was a terminology that the province used to define what was traditionally single detached or duplex dwelling, zones that only permitted that type of housing. And so that would be in our case R1, R2, R3, RA1, A1, A2, and there's a few others in there too. It's a list appendix. I believe it's appendix F to the staff report, kind of lists all the restricted zones, but it is in our traditionally where single family homes were permitted. And the province said, no more. You're going to allow up to 4 dwelling units on every single restricted zone in all communities. And so that's what a restricted zone is.
Thank you.
Councillor Doat.
Yeah, just interesting bylaw. I think I know what it's about, having read it and studied it a little bit. I'm wondering if you might explain for the people in the audience and anybody who's watching us, if we pass this motion tonight, can you explain what impact that decision might have on someone who's applying for a building permit or a subdivision permit after we vote on this tonight, and what will happen next, and what are the next steps for the public?
Through the chair to Councillor Dowd. Well, the province went about Bill 44 uniquely. They required municipalities to update their zoning bylaw long before their official community plan. So if somebody came in with we'll call it a building permit to create 4 dwelling units on a restricted lot, they would be permitted to do that today. So the impact is minimal. What the province also required, though, as I mentioned, the mandated timeline by the end of this year, as they said, yes, you updated your zoning bylaw that had to be done by June 30th, 2024. Now you have to come back and align your OCP to ensure that it's in keeping with your zoning bylaw, which is the opposite way one would usually go about that process. You usually update your OCP and then your zoning bylaw, but the province was keen to get Bill 44 active and moving and seeing houses being built, and so they gave municipalities the ability to kind of reverse engineer that.
Just follow up a little bit. I think really what the motion says when we read it is that we were giving notice of council's intention to give first and second reading to the bylaw at a future date. So all we're doing, if we vote in favor of this tonight, is saying we're going to think about doing this. Here's the draft we're looking at, and it's going to be coming back to council before anything changes. I see you nodding. Thank you.
Through the chair, yes, I agree with that.
I'll make the motion to start debate if necessary. That I move that council direct staff to issue notice of its intention to consider first and second reading of City of Pell River Sustainable Official Community Plan 2370-2014, Amendment Bylaw 2783-2025 pursuant to Local Government Act Section 473.1 at a future meeting of council.
Councillor Almeida.
And just to speak to it, for those who want to understand a bit more about what these changes might encompass, the Appendix E in the report has highlighted changes in it, so you can see what exists now and what is being suggested in its place. I really appreciate the work that staff have done to describe basically the changes in our community, that we're growing more rapidly than anticipated at the previous SOCP. It acknowledges our housing start growth, the changes in demographics, and so there's like a general change in description. It updates those basic language around single-family dwelling to address legislation around small-scale multi-unit housing. Adds the item about addressing those experiencing homelessness, and the last change also focuses on active transportation and focusing development towards areas that are close to amenities along transportation corridors and in areas serviced by infrastructure, which has generally been the approach that this council and staff have taken, but it makes it more specific. So happy to see this, making sure that we're in alignment with legislation and really only making 2 additions that are kind of aligned with existing practice, and do a general housekeeping update to align with legislation. Thank you.
No further discussion. I'll move. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Your Worship. Sorry, I was slow in that. I just wanted to clarify, there is no public hearing required for this amendment?
The chair, there is a public hearing required, yes.
Okay, so I thought that that was the case, and I didn't hear it as far as our next steps when you were outlining that, and so I just was hoping to highlight the idea that we're going to do these readings and then there'll be a public hearing prior to the final.
Further discussion? All in favor? Motion passes unanimously. 9.2.
Thank you.
Proposed Bylaw 2780. Is a permissive tax exemption.
I move that permissive tax exemption bylaw 2780-2025 be adopted.
By Councillor Doubt.
This and the subsequent 2 motions are related to permissive tax exemptions for nonprofit organizations on property taxes and other taxes owed. And this has been discussed at least 2 other council meetings before, and this would represent final adoption tonight. Thank you.
The discussion? All in favor? Passed unanimously. 9.3. So Elliott,
I move that permissive tax exemption bylaw 2781 2025 be adopted.
out. Sorry, Councillor Southcott. All in favor? Passed unanimously. Councillor Almeida.
Thank you, Mayor. 9.4 has to do with the Living Water Foursquare Church, which I am a part of. So I have in the past excused myself for this section of council.
You. So Isaacs.
I move that permissive tax exemption bylaw 2782 2025 be adopted.
Councillor Elliott. Any further discussion? All in favor? Passed unanimously. We ask, oh, he's back. We'll move to unfinished business. City of Powell River Council Strategic Priorities 2024-2026 update. Over to our Chief Administrative Officer.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Woznow. So as noted in my report, there have been no updates to council to date, summarizing progress on the 2024-2026 council strategic priorities. The report that I've created is intended to provide council with an update on the progress that has transpired to date on these priorities and to request council direction as to which priorities staff should focus on over the remainder of the council term. A document that shows the priority, goals, and progress, along with some staff comments in relation to the actions to date, is attached as Appendix B. So an important consideration for council when reviewing this update is that although the council strategic priorities are important drivers for staff and the corporate work plan, many of the ongoing departmental assignments and workload consist of regular operational tasks associated with delivering existing services, contractual obligations, and meeting regulatory and statutory reporting requirements for provincial and federal governments and agencies. Over the past 2 years, there's also been major changes in organizational leadership and significant staffing shortages throughout the organization that have lessened the ability of staff to move forward several key initiatives. You will see from the summary of work undertaken that some goals have advanced while others have limited or no action undertaken. And so I'm hoping that council will be able to review their strategic priorities tonight along with the progress update and provide direction to staff as to which priorities council wants staff to focus on for the remainder of the term. And again, I've tried to keep it as simple as possible, but provide council with updates on each of the different council strategic priorities and the goals, along with progress and, where applicable, staff comments as well. And we've gone through them all. Happy to answer any questions that council has. And again, this is meant to be an opportunity for feedback to staff so that when we go into the next budgeting cycle and the final year, we can hopefully move some of these forward. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you for the excellent report. Councillor Doubt.
Just a preliminary question to the CAO. Was that your intention to go through all the items in Appendix B one at a time, or discuss them in that order? Or just...
I wasn't intending to do that. I was going to leave it at the will of council to ask questions and sort of move through the conversation on their own. But if you want me to go through and talk about any of the comments in there, I'm happy to do so.
I'm just trying to figure out where we're going to go. I think it's a lot to try to get through and get council consensus on, or at least council's concurrence by the majority on each one of these. But I'm prepared to go and ask some questions about it and address some of the items in the plan, or particularly in the column that talks about staff comments and where we're going to go from there. And just to begin with, I think the goal number one is part of it is to bring forward issues from the Tla'amin Nation to C3 and nation to city meetings. And over on the bullet points, it has no current participation in C3 and nation city meetings. Intergovernmental Relations Working Group meets instead. And I just want to clarify that there are no meetings, no C3 or C2 meetings or city to Tla'amin Nation meetings happening between elected representatives, and the Intergovernment Relations Working Group is set up with myself, Councillor Alameda, and Councillor Isaacson to meet with 3 representatives of the Tla'amin Nation in an effort to get back to having C3 and C2 and Tla'amin Nation and city meetings. We're not having those meetings. We're not replacing those meetings. We're trying to get back to a place where the nation and the city could actually meet. And I want to mention a positive thing that actually took place at UBCM, where the Tla'amin Nation, which is a member of the UBCM, actually made a motion to have Indigenous values and methods considered in having meetings between cities and nations. So I think that's important, but I think I'd like to change the language in there to indicate what the Intergovernmental Relations Working Group actually does. We don't meet instead of the C3. We meet to try to get back to where we could have C2 and C3 meetings. Quite different.
Yeah, I see how you've interpreted what was written on there in a certain manner. What was meant to be in there was that you guys are currently not meeting as a C3, but there is Intergovernmental Relations Working Group meetings taking place. So
the difference is the Intergovernmental Working Group can't come to any conclusions. It's only 3 members of council and doesn't have the ability to make any decisions.
Yeah, and I do understand that it doesn't say that that's meant to replace it or do the same thing. It's just noting that there is some communication still on some level, but thank you for that.
Thank you, Your Worship. On that same page, I would like to make a motion with respect to item 2. And the motion has been sent to our administrative or legislative assistant, so I'm pretty sure it will be on the screen. So I move that intergovernmental strategic priority number 2 be amended to strike the phrase timed with the 2026 municipal election, and for staff to bring back a report to council on possible paths forward to address this strategic priority and the 11 recommendations of the joint working group, including budget, resource allocation, time requirements, and other relevant information. If there's a seconder, I'll speak to it. Thank you.
Good, so Scott.
So basically, this has worried me for some time because the item states that strategic priority. The first part of it involves engaging the public on a topic of a name change. There certainly has been no lack of conversation or concern in our community, but there hasn't been any substantive engagement performed or achieved by the city for the community. It's my belief that there isn't time to really achieve that, and if paying attention to the comments here by the CAO, we are still in a situation where there's limited staff capacity. We have had more turnover in staff that would be involved with exactly this kind of work. So it isn't likely to start soon enough to really get to the point where the preliminaries within that strategic priority, as it's stated, would put us into a position of fairly being able to do a poll at a year from now anyway. So I want to make it really clear that it's only the timing that is changed. The rest of the intention of that strategic priority, according to this amendment, would be maintained. Certainly the intention, I don't personally believe that that we're ever going to get around this. We need to go through it. And so that's my reasoning for putting this forward tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've always been in support of having a comprehensive community engagement process, which we had thought we would receive outside funding for, and for a variety of reasons that didn't occur. We then tried to commit a staff position, being the intergovernmental relations person that might be able to come up with a process so that we could do this. And that position didn't get filled as of yet, and is, I think, being changed a little bit or reallocated. So I do think it's fair that we need a report from staff to see how that process could work. And we literally do not have time to sort out the budget, the process, and everything to make that timing work out. And so I think it is a good idea to decide sooner rather than later that we're not in a position to make that engagement happen in this time frame with the current staffing situation that we have and the fact that it doesn't have a line item in our budget at this point. So I'm in support of this motion.
Here we are. I've been thinking about this since I got the agenda and going through it. Actually, I've been thinking about it before that. Because we, back before the last election, before 2022, we appointed a group to look into the name change in response to the request from the Tla'amin Nation. They did a bunch of work, had community consultation as it was, and everybody's got their own comments on how well that reflected what the community wanted. We came up, there was a recommendation of 11 items to go through. Council has never sat down and looked at those 11 items in detail and made decisions on exactly go forward. We didn't do that, but we did get together during our strategic planning and make a motion to have an opinion poll timed with the 2026 municipal election. And I remember many delegations that came after we made that decision telling us what they wanted to see in that opinion poll, giving us ideas that maybe council was going to renege and not bother to do that at all, or put it off until some other time. But frankly, I'm not in favor of putting off the idea. I think that we could get together, we could get a report. If we have to, we hire a consultant, talk about positive ways to have community engagement. And if we at least start that community engagement with the commitment in place to have an opinion poll in 2026, we could see how that goes. We could see if we can get anywhere. I'd like to try and make a determination after we make an effort, not to simply say, well, we've decided we don't have the staff and we don't have the time and we don't want to do it right now. I think that would be abandoning our job, frankly, as a city council. So while I would like to see us do something with those 11 recommendations and start some kind of community consultation in as good a way as we can. But I don't want to start by saying we're not going to make a decision until sometime after 2027.
Councillor Palm.
Thank you, Your Worship. First of all, my comments as this motion, going to be brief. I don't want to find myself in the same situation I found in when I'm talking about this strategic plan priority. But I do have to say this. We settled on a process that was going to give the citizens of Powell River a voice in regards to this process. I still have of the same mind thoughts in this regard, that the public needs to be consulted. And one of the things first and foremost on my mind, if we're going to go down this road, I don't mind a report coming from staff. I mean, it's going to put a tremendous burden on staff to come up with something that everybody can live with. I can guarantee them that. However, this late hour of the last year of our term, bringing this back for further thought is not a bad idea, because we need to find a pathway forward to resolve this issue that's been brought before us. And we need to do education first and foremost, which has not been done since we passed that resolution some time ago in our strategic plan. I'm all for education. I'm all for hearing both sides of the equation and all the ramifications around that, because I don't think both sides have been totally heard up until now or at all. So starting that process of dialogue is one of the recommendations that I heard ministry people say in this building some time ago, and I second that. And then we can get to the election and give people a say with an opinion poll, which is non-binding, by the way, but it will show where the people of this community stand. So that's about all I have to say at this point, Your Worship. Thank you.
Councillor Isaacson.
Thank you, Mayor. I think that this motion is realistic. As time has ticked by over the past 3 years, my concern about the realities of taking these substantive steps in a good way has increased. And so just to be clear, the original wording of the strategic priority as it stands right now says, take substantive steps towards reconciliation with Tla'amin Nation by engaging the public on a topic of a name change, including a possible new name, leading up to a public opinion poll timed with the 2026 municipal election. So the only thing that this motion would change about that is the timing. And given Councillor Southcott referenced the staff report in the table. So what staff are saying is there are concerns regarding adequate timing remaining to undertake the necessary engagement in advance of the municipal election. I think about the time before the ballots get printed, that a question would have to be prepared, the engagement that would have to go into that, the planning or the analysis of the data, the planning of the engagement happening, stepping back, the planning of that engagement, and then engaging someone to carry out that engagement is not a short process. Not having the manager of partnerships, intergovernmental and public relations position filled at this time, probably may not be filled till January. Managing consultants and managing staff takes time, and so I think this is realistic. It's really important for me that we haven't had motion to date, and it's important to me that motion doesn't stop. And so this continues the motion, but is quite frankly realistic. I think sometimes council has high hopes, and then we have the realities of the budget, of staff constraints, of timing, and I think this is a realistic change to the list of strategic priorities. Thank you.
Yes, Councilor Media and then the mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Was back and forth a little bit, trying to process this motion. I appreciate Councillor Southcott making an effort to bring something to the table for discussion. I'm torn because I feel like this motion is actually two different motions put into one, and could easily be split. With the second half about the staff report being an independent motion on its own, regardless of whether the wording is removed or not from the strategic priority. And when I look at the strategic priorities, I would think the only reason to remove words at this point would be to look back on it a year from now to check off which priorities we achieved or didn't achieve. And if we are that concerned with the check marks, then we'd also have to remove the word substantive from this priority, because in 12 months, I don't think we're going to get substantive steps on this particular priority. So I think as it stands right now, I'm not in favor of this motion because I just don't feel like it's going to make the impact. I'm not opposed to the report if provided in a separate motion, although as Councillor Isaacson and staff have shared, staff time might make that a challenge, but at least if a report is requested, that would be the first step that we're actually taking on this plan. And if it means 12 months from now, we look back at this particular priority and we can acknowledge we didn't achieve it, so be it. And maybe we've taken a couple of steps, but I don't think we need to change the wording in order to make the priority a little easier to achieve.
Okay, I'm going to be aligned with Councillor Armida and Councillor Palm voting against this motion. I think that the citizens of Powell River have had significant number of opportunities to communicate on this issue, either through the Westview Ratepayers Association, Society, other ratepayers, a variety of different meetings that have taken place. And I think that unless our corporate officer says there is no way that we could prepare the paperwork before the next provincial election, I will vote against this motion. So I will ask our our chief administrative officer if he feels that there is still 12 months being reasonable to prepare the paperwork required to have a vote the next election.
Just for clarification of paperwork, you're meaning the stuff for the opinion poll to take place during the election. Is that what you mean by the paperwork?
Yes, what voters will see when they go to the voting booth.
So I think the challenge with that is I don't know what would go on that, and that's the whole engagement that would need to take place between now and the creation of the paperwork would be to engage the public on the possibility of a name change, including a possible new name. So to me, I just, as someone coming into the community from afar and looking into this and trying to figure out what's been done and what's substantive enough to move forward and put something on the election, I don't see it. And so that's led me to the comments that I have, is that is there time in order to get it done? Creating a question is relatively simplistic, but actually doing the background work to get to another possible name or the others, it just hasn't been done. There hasn't been any work done on it. So I want to be realistic about what we're able to achieve. And I don't think as we're currently structured that we would really have an opportunity to give it justice to what needs to be done. I've looked at the 11 recommendations that come out, and there's actually a lot. There's a lot in there. So even the report on how to address that is going to be a big undertaking moving forward. But the notion of doing a report and still trying to move forward with a poll to address Councillor Almeida's comments is completely unrealistic.
So just to follow up then, if the opinion poll was simply to state, do you support a change of the city's name of Powell River?
If council in their wisdom decided that that's all they wanted to ask, we could put that on a poll. I don't think that meets the what was intended by the council strategic priority, but again, I work for council, and if that's what you wanted to do, that's what we could move forward.
Thank you. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think what is clear is that a work plan to land an opinion poll 1 year from now is significantly different starting today than a work plan to identify a good process and what that would cost, what it looks like, what is required through a report, given everything that's gone on and where we're at today, would be a significantly lower bar and perhaps potentially possible within that year. And to shortchange the process by having an opinion poll that does not include the engagement that we require in order to get the job done is not keeping this. We're not keeping the intent of the strategic priority. So I think what would help us today is to decide, are we proceeding to have an opinion poll and pare down what we expected of that opinion poll, or are we going to do a process that includes more community engagement and the groundwork required to do an opinion poll as we had stated in our original goal? So are we changing our goal, or are we changing the timeline? Because we can't do both. And so this motion speaks to changing the timeline, not the goal. And so if you're not in favor of changing the timeline and you'd rather change the goal, then you would vote no on this. If you think changing the timeline is better than changing the goal, then we could do that through this motion. Thank you.
Southcott. Sorry, I didn't see that.
Councillor Southcott to go first.
This really, I just want to point out that the first phrase in this amendment does not preclude us from doing an opinion poll consequent with the next election. It just says it takes that language out. So it softens our commitment as far as Councillor Elliott, I think, just mentioned, to a timeline. If we weren't ready, we're still committed to the process, but we could delay the opinion poll. But the process is really what is primarily important to me. So I just wanted to reassure us that it is in no way a retraction of the commitment to work on this. That's my intention. Councillor Palm.
Thank you, Worship. But Councillor Scott, thank you for that clarification, because I was looking at that wording in terms of where we are and what we passed in a haphazard strategic plan some time ago. I'm just scratching my head going, where are we? So if the intent is simply to start the education process, why don't we say that? We don't have to go down the road of 11 recommendations and the cost factors associated with that and all the rest. We can simply get on with the education that needs to be done and hopefully bring people together and put some satisfaction in their mind that the good work is being done, which needs to be done. And then people are going to be informed and be able to make a informed decision just like we do doing our homework up here at this table. Yeah, that's it for now. Thank you.
Councillor Doat.
So, I think we're in the middle of second-time speakers right now. I don't know how many times we're going to go around, but to me, I'm not going to say the same thing I said in the first round over again. I am going to say that that language removes the priority of having a opinion poll in line with the 2026 election. It does that. Can't pretend it doesn't do that. We might decide to do it again some other time. And from the opinion of staff that they've been hearing, if we pass this motion as it is, that will be the end of it. And they'll be starting to think about how to get consultation going, maybe after the 2026 elections. That's what I see will happen. If we were talking about asking staff for a report on how and if we could go ahead with the community engagement, that would be a different thing. But we are moving the goalpost. We are changing a commitment that we made to the people of Powell River, and I don't want to do that. That's why I'm going to vote no.
Thank you. Councillor Isaacson.
Thank you, Mayor. So to address a couple of the concerns that have come up, Councillor Almeida talked about removing that language is solely so that we can, check that box at the end. I think actually what it does is it provides clarity to the public rather than draw this out over the next year. I think not knowing or not knowing how far we're going to get by the next election drags the pain out. And I think that the community deserves clarity on what's realistic. And so in supporting that first bit there, as Councillor Elliott and a few councillors have said, it does not change the goal, it just changes the timeline. And so it is about providing certainty sooner rather than later, and actually gets things started. So if we want to, I think that this here does exactly what Councillor Doubt and Councillor Palm suggest in terms of getting on with public education. We can't do that. Everything that happens starts with a plan from staff, a report where they say, hey, this is how we think we're going to go forward. Do you support this? And so everything starts with a report. This is a way for us to get moving and provide clarity to the public on what's realistic, because I think one of the more difficult aspects of all of this process is, it causes a lot of people a lot of angst, and especially around the uncertainty. And so providing a bit of certainty as to what is our next step going to be? Well, we don't feel like we're going to have time to do things in a good way before the next municipal election, but we do want to take the next step. We do want to work on education and community engagement. The first step to that is getting a report on how to address the strategic priority, which is all about public engagement. So this again provides some certainty to the public on an angst-ridden issue, and helps us take the first step. Thank you.
My closing comment is that I see no need for further education. There's been 3 years of active discussion on the issue of a non-binding vote at the next election. And if for whatever reason we are not able to put this on the next election, I'm sure that we will see the result by who's elected and their position on the name change. So to me, it's relatively insignificant whether or not this is achieved, although, as people have said, I think it's important, since we advocated to the voters of Powell River that this would happen, that it happened. So any further discussion before I call the motion? Councillor Palm.
I'm just trying to bring a little clarity to the motion here. This is very convoluted, and we're all going to be voting for different reasons in this regard because there's so much to this, so many unanswered questions in this motion. I'd like to see us defeat this motion and just put something in writing to the effect that we ask staff to bring a report to council on possible paths forward on this strategic item, and leave it at that for the time being, because we have a short period and we've heard from staff tonight. Resources and the time allotment aren't there. I'm gravely concerned. We have a lot bigger fish to fry in terms of our finances and getting our house in order to survive the next couple of years. Let's be perfectly honest here.
Okay, we have a motion. We've thoroughly discussed it. All in favor? Opposed? And the motion is defeated. Now, there are a number of other strategic objectives, and I would like to talk about economic vibrance. I believe that we have achieved little in terms of meeting the strategic objectives of economic vibrancy. So I would like to see this be a priority in terms of what staff does, in terms of looking at the opportunities. We have 160 city-owned properties. There have been motions brought forward that have been consistently defeated that would have done something to increase our economic vibrancy. So that is my position in terms of the priority of the issues that we have, that staff would allocate more time to increasing the economic vibrancy so that we have a hope of having less than 11.3% increase in taxes next year. Any other discussion on our strategic objectives? Councillor Elliott?
Thank you, Your Worship. The page that has our healthy community, point number 4 in that, or goal number 4 under healthy communities, was creating a housing authority working with partners to create sustainable, permanent, affordable housing. Just recently at the regional district, there was a motion passed to do a feasibility study that could include a housing authority or some other type of agency or partnership that would work on affordable housing. And so I think we could, in partnership with the Cathet Regional District, participate or express an interest to provide input to and participate in the feasibility study being commissioned that was approved by the Regional District Board, and make that a single process. And so I don't know if a motion is required, but this is kind of an update that there's an opportunity to piggyback and on that particular goal with the Cathet Regional District, because I'm aware that there was a motion made to that effect recently.
Councillor Doudt.
Yeah, and I've actually had number 4 queued up on my list of things I'd like to talk about earlier. Now, currently number 4 says, create a housing authority working with partners to create a sustainable, permanent, affordable housing. And that's the goal that we set. I tend to agree with that goal. Before the last election, Councillor Elliott, Councillor Isaacson, I think a number of other councillors spent a lot of time working in different places like UBCM conventions, talking to other municipalities that had housing authorities that are a means to address the ability to create affordable and attainable housing for people with various levels of income, not supportive housing, not shelter housing, but housing of various levels of expense for people who can attain them. People can get housing within the community. It's becoming impossible for many people in the community to get market housing. And, staff is looking at it and saying they just don't have the ability or effort, staff time to go and create a housing authority. I'm going to make a motion to amend number 4 to work towards creating a housing authority and the rest of the words that are in there. It doesn't assume create. It would, if there's maybe I should see a seconder.
We have a seconder.
Okay, we have a seconder. So the amendment would be to work towards creating a housing authority. That could include working with the regional district, and it could include the reports that council has already asked staff to come up with about steps to move forward. It doesn't say it has to be created, it has to be all written out and designed and everything by next October. It says, let's start working towards it. I think it's an important thing. It's one of the things I think is the most important need in our community to continue to have this a great place to live. Frankly, it was an affordable community anymore. So, I'm hoping this amendment gets passed and we can make some efforts in the next year towards the housing authority.
Councillor Isaacson.
Thank you. I think this is, in the spirit of the recently defeated motion, in the sense that it acknowledges that we're not likely going to create a housing authority in the next year, but encourages encourages action on it, and working towards, as Councillor Dowd and Councillor Elliott have mentioned, might involve working with the regional district. So I think this is an example of a more realistic version of what is possible before the end of our term. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion? All the motion, all in favor? Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Any further discussion by direction?
Park plan, even though it's not hazard and not quite well there, but our economic vibrancy section refers to here very timely in terms of where we are, our applications and taxpayer to it. We need to focus on our current assets and get staff to start bringing forward a report on how we can minimize taxation without getting to double digit again. How to manage our assets that are in the ground so that we don't have monumental rains coming through and flooding basements throughout the community. Rates for not just the surface of our homes. And we need to become more and more a service line station that serves the public daily basis, because that's the number one part of the city, serve its citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? That's Councillor.
Yeah, I think generally what the table does at the end of the table outlines, what staff have been working on, what the limitations are. So, for example, the asset management plan, depends on really hiring a new director of infrastructure to assist in implementing this goal. I think generally the third column is kind of like, without making any more changes, it's kind of like carry on, do what you can with what you have when you have it. And it sounds like by not making major changes to this, we would be telling staff, carry on with what you're doing, focusing on the things that you have time and the staff capacity to carry out. And so I just want to acknowledge the staff work and the realistic overview that the report and the table, the report and table provided. And so I don't, anyways, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Councillor Dowd and then Councillor Elliott.
And not to be repetitive, but I think I said at the beginning, this is not a small amount of work to take where we are and our simple list of priorities and turn it into actions and possibilities. And I'm impressed that staff has got this done, and I'm maybe even more impressed that council seems to have come to an agreement on how to move forward on these things. I think that's a good thing, and hopefully it'll give staff some room to work and get some of these things done, because we all hope it happens, and they're all important things to the community. So I just want to thank everybody who worked on the report. I think it's probably a lot of the people on our staff who did.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Your Worship. So in the environmental ones, number 3, the advance to zero waste for solid waste and organics, including events, city spaces, and support of repair and reuse. It says no progress. I beg to differ. We've implemented the green bin process throughout the city since we made this thing. We've also been supportive as a council for special use permits for the Kindred. I can't remember their name off the Kindred Rebuild, who does repair and reuse processes, and they are now going to move to and it was temporary because they were going to move to the new resource recovery center, and that's happening imminently, I believe, or at some point in the future still. And so that plan is in support of this goal. So maybe we didn't have time to put those updates within this table, but I know those happened and are part of the advancing to zero waste. And I think we use that filter when we're making decisions that come before us with council, and our planners do as well. So I do think we have work to do when it comes to events and things like that and city spaces, and looking forward to that happening in the future. But I just wanted to say that we have made progress on that one. And I think we need to, at some point, have a way of allocating our limited staff resources to our priorities without eliminating them. So we're not doing that with this exercise. And so I'm wondering if there's an exercise that gets staff more clarity on where to assign their resources than what we have going on here right now.
CAO.
One of the questions that I have was staff involved in the creation of the strategic priorities? Like, did they sit in the same room as with council when council was coming up? So if best practices are followed about the creation of strategic priorities, it'll help with implementing strategic priorities, because staff generally sit in the room with council when this takes place and says, we can do this, we can't, here's the resources, this is where it's at. So it's tough to play catch up after the fact when it is, but just passing that forward.
Yeah, many of our strategic goals do lack implementation plans. And so that's why they require staff reports and a plan. And quite correct, yes.
Councillor Amita.
Thank you, Mayor. I think to piggyback the CAO's comments, I think we were playing catch up right from the start with our strategic priorities, which became priorities because it was a year later before we got anything confirmed. I'm curious, since staff put the time into this detail of the report, that it's somewhat easy for individual councillors to pick different items and say I'd like this and like that, and we don't control what staff have capacity for, to some extent. But I was curious if staff, when putting this report together, seeing some stuff that hadn't been touched yet, or hadn't been touched very much, if there was a couple things that jumped out of them that were being like, hey, we've got the capacity to do this, there just hasn't been the direction yet. Instead of us trying to pick a strategy, maybe there's something that staff sees.
Great. Thanks for that, Councillor Amita. What staff tried to do in this is, through the staff comments, provide enough context to what staff thought could be done or not be done over the next 12 months, but ostensibly less, considering there is an election and there's some other processes moving forward. A typical process for a strategic planning and a review of it would include an annual review, usually in closed session with staff at the end of the year, where council kicks around these things and gets a bit more into the weeds in terms of this. This is a bit of a combination of it, both an update and an observation from staff moving forward. So again, a little bit outside of normal process. I think that for some of these goals, there's more than just the city involved. So the first goal about reconciliation with Kalaman, there's two sides. So there's other things that need to take place there. Again, advocating to the province for stuff. Some of the low hanging fruit I think was dealt with already. The council code of conduct there. We've been working on recreation. Some of the stuff for prioritizing city owned land. But I do think that ideally the comments that we put into the side for staff comments sort of shows where we think we can go. Where we're at now without a lot of changes to this plan is we'll just keep hammering away at that. What does that mean for the name change? It means when we've got resources, which is hiring the new position, they'll be tasked with looking at this right away and bringing a report to council that talks about what we're looking to do. Does that mean that it changes whether or not it can take place? I don't know if it does, to be honest, but again, that'll rely on future council direction. Yeah, so I mean, the OCP's already been delayed. The housing authority is something that's on our work plan already that we're moving ahead on. The active transportation stuff again is good. We've got the transit future service plan coming forward on there. GHG stuff, again, we're moving forward. There's a couple other things on the project. So there's lots that we can do moving forward, but there's a couple of these really big ones that I just don't know how realistic it is. So that was really what we wanted to try to move across. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Southcott.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Just want to say I really appreciate this report because it really helps me have a sense of a fair bit of achievement that's associated with these strategic plans, in spite of the fact that for the first time, staff was not involved in the development of a strategic plan, in my experience anyway. So I only really had the one item of concern personally on this list. But I think we need to be grateful for things that are being done and things that have been done and the potential for getting more things done, which this report is all about. So it's really positive, actually, in my view, and I just really wanted to express that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move now to committee reports. 13.1 is the Harbor User Advisory Committee meeting held July 2nd, 2025. Would a councillor like to speak to this?
Your Worship, I can say a few words. This is going to be posted on our website. There's not a lot of content involved in these minutes. This refers to our meeting before the summer on July 2nd. We have had another meeting since then, 1st of October, first week of October. And if council has any questions about anything in the report, I can bring up speed on any of these items. You're going to be hearing a lot more as we go forward. We have a meeting on October 2nd. If we sorted out a few more things, we sorted out about how that committee is going to operate. And at this point in time, that's about all.
Thank you. I will now move to item 16, which is public clarification. Members of the public may ask questions to clarify items discussed during the meeting for a maximum of 2 minutes. Do we have anybody? Yes.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Roger Whitaker. And one of the comments made tonight was interesting in that it said the goal of the strategic plan when talking about intergovernmental and the name change was all mixed together. So for clarity, what is the goal of that part of the strategic plan?
CAO.
Sorry, for which part?
Are you supposed to? So Councillor Elliott said that this would disrupt the goal of the strategic plan. That's what I heard anyway. And I wonder, what is the goal of the strategic plan in regard to especially intergovernmental and the name change?
Clearly.
Thank you. So the goal is as written in the intergovernmental relations section of our strategic goals. And the goal was to take substantive steps toward reconciliation with Alma Nation by engaging the public on the topic of a name change, including a possible new name, leading up to a public opinion poll, and then timed with the 2026 municipal election. So that goal is all of that. So doing one piece of that doesn't meet the entire goal, and that was my point I was trying to make. So we can have an opinion poll, but it may not include the rest of the goal, which was the engaging of the public on the topic, including a possible new name change. So the extensive engagement of the public part, there's no budget for it, no plan, no implementation plan for that on the table as of yet. And there has been no progress on that. And so in order to conduct the goal as a whole, we're kind of out of time. We're behind the 8 ball. And so that was the point I was trying to bring forward.
I wonder, and certainly hard to believe that a citizen might offer something that this council might want to do, but I think maybe you should be arguing about whether or not you want or not put into that particular goal a possible name change or not, so that it's not so weighted to one side.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Galinsky? Thank you. Do we have anybody online? Nobody online? Then we're going to adjourn. Thank you for joining us this evening.